Hey everyone, welcome back to the Dairy Raid. It is Thursday morning, and it's been an eventful week so far for Wisconsin football, and in an effort to be more regular with the content again, and in order not to get behind on the news, let's do another walk and talk and go through some of the headlines and also get to some of your questions. Didn't even solicit questions this time, and the inbox is already starting to fill up. So we're going to get to a few of them. A couple of the questions that I have are more big picture stuff that we might save till later in the off season, but there are some that pertain to what is in the headlines right now. And the big one, obviously, is the soon to be the opening of the transfer portal, and players already submitting themselves for the transfer portal ahead of time. And what I find really interesting with the transfer portal this year is reading some of the exit interviews that the players who have entered the portal have been doing. And especially, I like reading what Jesse Temple, I know he always reaches out to the players and asks if they have any comments. And he does get some responses. And the one that I want to highlight here is Curt Neal and what he had to say as he was exiting the program. Now, if you've watched any of my breakdowns this year where I've talked about the defense, he has been the topic of discussion quite a few times. He's a talented player, but at times I felt through this season he has fundamental flaws in his game. For a player who's so short, a shorter defensive tackle, he has a tendency to play high and allows himself to be washed out in the run game in particular. And when I describe it that way, and you watch his game, you would think, well, maybe he's just not that good. Maybe he's another member of the 2021 recruiting class that is just underperforming. And then you hear read his exit interview, and him talking about the type of game that he wants to play and his quote-unquote playing style. Not gelling with what he's being asked to do for the Badgers defensive line. And I find it really curious with the way that he put it. And it leads to some questions. So, in summary, I'm not going to go through every point. I encourage you to go to The Athletic and read Jesse Temple's piece. But essentially what he says is he wants to be aggressive, shoot through the gap, and penetrate. He wants to be aggressive to the football, which is fine. But he goes on to say, when asked what type of system he wants to go play in, he mentioned he wants to play in a 4-3 defense that caters to his playing style, which is fair enough. I think as players going into college football, they should try to find systems that fit the defense or fit their playing style. But that leads me to wonder, why did he commit to Wisconsin in the first place if that's the type of defense he wants to play? It's that moniker that we gave before of fitball. And the funny thing is he called what the Badgers are playing now fitball, where he's taking quote-unquote mirror steps and he's being told to occupy a gap, which to me, that's not football. That's two-gap football. Because you're reading, you're reacting, and you're fitting a gap based on what the offensive lineman does in front of you. What he calls mirror steps is what in my system I call read steps. Every player on my defensive front has read steps. They go through their read steps based on the reaction or the movement of the offensive lineman in front of them, and they fit a gap. Okay? But what he wants to do, he just wants to go in the gap in front of him. Or slant or whatever. So he just wants to be told where to go. He doesn't want to have to think about it. But two-gapping and reading for a defensive line is, to me, what an odd front defense does. And honestly, it's what... Let me go this way. It's what most defensive tackles do. It's defensive tackle 101 if you're playing in a more modern scheme. So, well, yes, Keanu Benton was allowed to be aggressive playing for the Badgers. He was aggressive through his responsibility. He would still hold the gap. He would still control his gap. And then he would be aggressive and find the football. I think where Curt Neal had his issues is he would be aggressive to his gap. And then that would allow him to be washed out because he couldn't control the gap. And there's a big difference between getting in a gap and controlling the gap. He also lamented on doing the dirty work and letting the linebackers get the credit for it. Again, Curt, I hate to tell you this, what you have described as defensive tackle play. So that's just how it is. And you go out throughout football history and you find big Billy Badass middle linebackers, I guarantee you they had good defensive tackles in front of them. You know, Ray Lewis had Ted Washington and Tony Siragusa just gobbling up blockers. And that allows the linebackers to just flow from sideline to sideline. That's what defensive tackles do. Playing defensive tackle is it's a thankless job. Now, if he wants to be a more aggressive three-tech, pass rushing, B-gap edge setting defensive tackle, then he needs to play lower, he needs to play faster, and he needs to play longer. Things that he didn't do. When you're 6'1", it's kind of hard to play long. So they played him kind of how he fit. And it was basically nose tackle. Playing the A gap, reading the A gap, because when he did anything else, he tended to get washed out. So this leads me to a comment that I made yesterday on Twitter after some more of the players were announced. And this goes, what we're going to talk about here kind of encompasses about 4 or 5 different players that I've read making comments about why they're leaving. Is why we are seeing so many good players leave for the portal, and it's only going to get worse. And that is the idea of, right now, players have a lot more freedom than they used to, and they should have freedom. I think in the era of the transfer portal and NIL, that we're moving in a better direction where the players who do the real hard work in football are being compensated and are given the freedom that they deserve. However, what that has led to is the idea of instant gratification has blown up exponentially. So players don't have the patience to be developed physically, mentally, and emotionally, and they want to do it right now. They want to play right now because they're not thinking of the long term. They're thinking of their next paycheck. And now, it used to be it was getting from your first paycheck from your first contract in the NFL to getting the big money for your second one. Now, in college football, it's I can get a bigger NIL deal next year. And I could just keep going. And again, players should be allowed to chase their dreams, not saying anything against it. But what it's leading to is players don't have the patience to, one, be taught, two, to learn, and to understand that they might be flawed. When you see a player like Tretch Kahuna puts himself in the transfer portal and he talks about how he feels he was underappreciated. And maybe, I'm sure he felt that way. I guess that's a better way to put it. However, when he looked at his film, if he was asking himself honestly or telling himself honestly, was his game improving? Was he still making the same mental errors that he was early in the season? I mean, no offense to Tretch, I can think of at least 2 interceptions that are credited to Braden Locke that are 100% his fault. Again, he's a kid. He's young. He's going to make mistakes. So I'm not blaming the kid. I'm just saying what happened. He read leverage wrong, came out of his break wrong, made contact deeper into his route. These are problems that he had multiple times throughout the season. And when you add on the fact that he wasn't a spectacular blocker, he had flaws in his game, as a 19, 20-year-old kid will have. He'll have flaws in his game. But he sees it as he's underappreciated. And he sees, well, I can do what I'm good at better than what Will Pauling can do. The problem is Will Pauling can do everything that Tretch Kahuna does bad way better. So when you average everything out, that's why Will Pauling's on the field. And for as athletically gifted as Tretch Kahuna is, ask any quarterback and they would take a Will Pauling at his stage in his career more than they would take a Tretch Kahuna at this point in his career. That might change in a year or two. But what's going to happen is now Tretch is going to go find somebody who is going to praise what he does good, maybe overlook what he does bad, and is going to give him that instant gratification that he needs. And that's the nature of college football these days. That's how things have changed. And when you read like how Amari Snowden just didn't get how he was being coached, he didn't understand. It really didn't seem like he understood the role of the cornerback in the Badgers defense. The way it's described sounds a lot more like team ball, and what he's looking for is more Amari ball, which again is what's going to get him NIL deals. It's what's going to get him, stuff later when he gets into the NFL. So I'm not dogging the kid, and I'm not dogging any kid who decides to go in the portal. But this leads into, I saw a video yesterday of J.J. Watt on Pat McAfee show talking about how development has stalled at the college and the NFL level. Well, and that's because kids don't want to be developed. Kids don't want to be developed, and more importantly, coaches don't want to waste the time developing kids. Because honestly, coaches can see it now where 50% of the work they're doing is to develop players for them, and 50% of what they're doing is developing players for somebody else. And it might even be worse now. You know, I'm starting to look at some of these names that are in the transfer portal already, and people are asking, oh, how would this quarterback fit? How would this receiver fit? And I'm just seeing so many guys who the Badgers would be their third school or fourth school. And I wouldn't want to do that. I wouldn't want to coach up a kid to the highest level to then know that he's going to go play for somebody else. Fuck that. I'm going to coach the kids who want to be coached and who want to be developed, because in the long run, that's going to make them a better player and going to give them a longer career. But players don't see that, and coaches don't care as much anymore. So, and that's something that's not going to get any better. It's, quite frankly, only going to get worse going forward. So, which leads to a question that I got, basically asking what can be done in this new age of the transfer portal and NIL to combat this issue. Well, the only thing that's going to happen that's going to fix it is if they put some kind of restrictions on NIL in terms of like a salary cap or whatever you want to do. Now that there's going to be revenue sharing, that is going to change the landscape even more. And then they need to bring back the limit on transfers. That is the only way things are going to change, is that there is some kind of regulation that levels the playing field and then really makes players think about their choices before they make them. Right now, you have a combination of players reacting on instinct or on feeling and instinct and emotions, predatory agents who are taking advantage of 17, 18, 19-year-old kids, and again, with no regulation, you do what you can when you can. So there's going to have to be some hard decisions made, and there's going to have to be some compromises made if any of those changes are going to happen. All right, so enough with the transfer portal stuff. Obviously, technically, the transfer portal hasn't even opened yet. It doesn't open until next week. We've just had names put in, and to put a nail on that coffin, a lot of the players who ended up leaving, I expected. Treach was a surprise, but everyone else who's entered so far, I can't say that I'm surprised. They were either guys who were buried on the depth chart or guys who really didn't have a future. So, God bless them. I hope they go find what they're looking for at another place. But, next question, and I'm addressing it now because as the person who wrote it in the question, this might be obsolete by the time we get to the next walk and talk. Luckily it's not. And that is, when do we expect the new offensive coordinator to be named? Well, I mean, the cheap and easy answer to say is sooner rather than later. But Luke Fickell actually addressed that question in his press conference yesterday after signing day. And he said he's doing his due diligence and really making sure they get the right guy this time. I think that's partially a stalling answer. I think they've put feelers out to people, and I think some dominoes have fallen that have put monkey wrenches into some of their plans. Some of the head coaching jobs available, some of the coordinator jobs that are available are going to affect how they're looking going forward. That's one way to look at it. Two, they're narrowing in on a guy, but it's contract and it's money that they are sorting out, that they want to make sure they get right so they can lock in a guy for a long term. So whatever it is, what it is. My guess had always been that they would name the offensive coordinator about 2 weeks from when they posted the job, which I believe is what they are mandated to do. I keep forgetting if it's 1 week or 2 weeks with assistant coaches, but that would make 2 weeks this coming Wednesday, a week from yesterday, which to me makes sense. You know, they want to get through early signing day. They want to get through the news cycle that comes with the new signing day, and they want to get a guy locked down for when the transfer portal officially opens next week. Now, it sounds like the Badgers are already putting feelers out for quarterbacks. I saw Texas A&M has a quarterback that's available that the Badgers apparently are interested in. So I think they have a pretty good idea of where they're going in the portal. In the portal for their OC. I think we can definitely see where they might be going based on how the quarterback room is still relatively intact. I mean, Landon Locke signed his letter of intent yesterday. Braden has said that he wants to stay. So that obviously means that they are comfortable with either the idea of who they're bringing in or have been told who. I'm sure they're in the loop. The same with Carter Smith. You see how active his dad is on social media and how positive he is about the Badgers. So I think they're in the loop, and I think that means we are closer to getting an answer to the OC. I would say within the next week. Probably, I would say early next week. By latest Wednesday would be my guess. And we also got a little bit of an insight of what Luke Fickell is looking for in his offensive coordinator, which could help us with some of the potential candidates. So you look at what he said, and he says he wants to be more pro style, but he wants to stay in the gun. He likes the thing that they were working on in the passing game, but they want to be under center for 6 to 10 snaps per game. That is fine. I think that narrows it down to everybody but the most extreme angles of the coaching search. So obviously Ben Arbuckle, he's at Oklahoma now. I would think that would probably eliminate someone like Jason Eck. It would probably eliminate someone like Brendan Marion. More the run-heavy focused guys. And I know the sweater vests are really pissed off when they hear stuff like that. But then also, it was said that he is interested in hiring both an offensive coordinator and a quarterback coach, which first thing in now that there are no limits to the amount of assistant coaches that a team can have on their staff, I think it's a smart idea. Coordinating an offense is not an easy job. Developing quarterbacks is not an easy job. And when you have to do both of them, while it has been done since the dawn of time, it is, if two people can do the job and delegate the work, it's going to make things a lot easier. It's going to make recruiting easier. It's going to make game planning easier. Everything like that. But what that also does is it expands the pool a little bit. And like I said in my candidate video, I was looking for a guy who was a quarterback-based offensive coordinator, because obviously, as has been said many times, we need to develop a quarterback. So, but when you talk that you are going to hire an offensive coordinator and a quarterback coach, that opens things up a little bit. So somebody like a Brian Hartline, who is a receiver coach. Someone maybe like Brendan Marion, who is a receiver coach by trade. To bring guys like that in is a little bit easier, because it's not going to require a complete reshuffling of the coaching staff. Or it's not going to require you to have to hire somebody who isn't a quarterback coach to coach quarterbacks. Again, another failing that I could say of Paul Chryst is he hired Bobby Ingram, who never coached quarterbacks before, to be his quarterback coach. Yes, he was the offensive coordinator, but when you do that, you're asking a guy who doesn't coach that position to lead that position. It's not a great idea. So hiring both is going to open things up. Now, could the offensive coordinator still be a quarterback-minded guy? Of course. And what could also be being done, if that's the case, is to have not only redundancy, but also checks and balances, where you have more than one guy focused on that aspect of the offense, and to kind of keep each other in check. Maybe he felt that Phil Longo had too much free reign and took the quarterbacks off in a tangent direction that he wasn't expecting. Who knows? But it is going to make this next weekend interesting, as I'm expecting that we're going to start hearing rumblings of people that they've had interviews with, and the potential candidate list gets really narrowed down. And I think it's either going to be a guy that we have heard and speculated about, or it's going to be totally left field. But a left field idea that once you look into the resume of the guy, kind of like AJ Blazek, I went through and came up with 10 plus candidates for the offensive line coaching job. Had no thought of AJ Blazek, but looking at the resume and hearing the man speak about offensive line play, it was totally the right call. And I'm guessing we could see something similar with the offensive coordinator. But it's got to be sooner rather than later, because getting into the portal, and with some holes that we have to fill in the portal, you need to know what kind of offense you're going to run in order to fill the correct holes. All right, and with that, we're coming up on a half hour, so I think we're gonna call it here with a probably eventful weekend coming up, with more transfer portal news and potentially coaching hires. We're going to have plenty to talk about next week. Got a couple questions in the mailbag that I do want to address, but I think I'm going to need to do that sitting at the computer where I can actually have some data in front of me. And that is the big one, and I guess I can tease it, is I had someone write into me and talk about the 2020 Wisconsin game versus Michigan, where the Badgers won, was it 49-11? And since that point, Michigan has gone on to win a national championship, and Wisconsin has gone on to miss a bowl game for the first time in 20 years. And how the two programs can go in such different directions in such a short period of time. So we're going to talk about that, and why that game, at least from the Badgers' point of view, was a symptom of more problems within the program than a high point that a lot of people make it out to be. So a little bit of a teaser there, something we'll talk about next week with, I'm sure, more coaching news and more transfer portal news. So that's it for today. Thank you for watching. Thank you for listening. And we will see you next time.